Tractate Sanhedrin, page 5. Today we're going to speak about the general subject of who is entitled and capable to get the different ordination. One category of ordination is ordination as a judge, rabbinic judge. The other one is a rabbi. In the modern days, you think someone goes to school, gets a certificate, and that's it. Obviously in those days it was a different category, and obviously we can derive a lot of lessons from the talk today. We're going to think first and foremost in the historic categories, in historic mindset, that in the early days it wasn't the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, and the one who's ordained as a judge, he needs to be not only a very familiar and erudite, but also he needs to have the permission, special consent from the head. And in those days in Babylon it was the auxiliar, the Reish Galuta, as well as the Nasi, the president in Israel. And we're going to learn the different kind of power, and basically someone who have a consent from the head of Israel will still need the consent of the auxiliar, which in a way the auxiliar was the last word when it's come to consent and permission. Another question we're going to deal with is getting ordination. Can one, in those days they used to get it from a well-recognized a Torah scholar and rabbi, someone can give it to his son or not, because there are many questions that people can and needs to have a real authority. Obviously, as we said, in those days was different. Today people go to school, get a complete a certain requirement, and then pass the tests, etc. But in the rabbinic world, there is a lot of stories of people that misconstrue or misled, sometimes innocently. It's a matter of fact that one of my colleagues told me that he stopped answering questions by phone. He said that one person called him before Yom Kippur and asked him that he is in a real bad condition, and he explained to him that he can drink, and he told him the amount that he can drink under his press circumstance. And the fellow approached him during the fast day of Yom Kippur and said, "Rabbi, I can't drink too much. You told me to drink so and so," which is, again, people many times misconstrue, and the idea is it's not only the knowledge, it's also the depth, the understanding, as the famous statement from the Khatam Sofer, I heard it also from one of the Hasidic rabbis, that they have people who are really walking computers. You ask them, they know all the sources. But from that point to know how to rule properly and explain to people in a way that they will be able to comprehend it properly is a total different story. So we are on page 5. Tanu Rabbanan Dinei Mamonot Bishlosha, the idea of the monetary law, monetary disputation. We need to have 3 rabbinic judges to have the session in the court. However, v'imaya mumche lerabim dan afilu yechidi. So if you remember the first page, page 2, we dealt about samuch, about the what's the tradition that transmitted goes back to the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Here, the Chidush Aran said that it applies to someone who's have such an erudition that he will be able not only to have the knowledge of the law, but the comprehension to transmit it. Tosfot tells us that even someone is a Torah scholar and he knows the law, but it's not enough. He needs to have mumche larabim, he needs to have an expert to deal with the masses, to deal with people. The Rabbeinu Asher and others challenged this Tosfot, and they said no, it has to be, which we call in the modern days posek hador, like my teacher of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Eliashiv, and others that have this type of capability to answer basically in any form, in any level, etc. That's, according to Rabbeinu Asher, that's really mumche larabim. I heard once a story about the late Rav Ovadia Yosef, may he rest in peace, the former chief rabbi of Israel and the one who provided me, as I showed the other day, a beautiful letter of approbation to my books. When he was in early part of his life, he was a rabbi in Egypt, and that time the Egyptian authority rules that in order to have a Bedin session, they cannot have independent rabbinic court, but in addition to two rabbis, they need to have their authority, which is their attorney, that basically writes the minutes and part of that court session, part decision. So here's a response of Ovadia, if that okay or not, and eventually he said, no, you can't do that. He says that his ruling and his education, his knowledge is not according to Torah law, and therefore it's not the category of someone who can sit in court. But here they said, Ve'ima mumche rabim, but if he's such an mumche, such an expert for the public, so then he can judge even as a single lone judge. Amar Rav Nachman kegon ana. So Tosfot explain it, but basically Rav Nachman, you see throughout the Shas, he was really not only the head of the court, but really tremendous, brilliant Talmid Chacham. Tosfot said, "V'chadetnan b'masechet Avot perek revi'i, al tehi dan yechidi, she'ein dan yechidi ela echad." So he said that we learn in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of Our Fathers, that a judge should not judge alone. So how come? So he gave two explanations. One, he said, it's kind of midat chasidut, the way it should be done. It's like lechatchila, the way that we wish to, or in a hindsight by force of circumstance. Or we said another one, he was so familiar with the dinim, so we're not concerned that he made a mistake. I remember some of my colleagues and Rabbeim, that you ask them a question, right away they knew exactly the chapter, the place. I was very privileged to have a father like that, and my son-in-law like that. I remember when he came here, the Rosh Hashiva, Rav Kav of Keren B'Yavne, said about my son-in-law the same. He says it's like, anytime in a shiur I need a source, I go to Reuven Deutsch and he knows. So there are some rabbis in that level that they can be in, like walking computer. Dan dinei mamonot biyichidi. Rashi said here, he said, Dan dinei mamonot biyichidi, בצדק תשפוט עמיתך, וכסבר אין כאן פרשיות, so it means that be able to rule independently. וכן אמר רבי חייא כגון ענה דן דיני ממונות ביחידי. היא באה אלוהו. כגון ענה דגמירנה וסבירנה. When he used the term, it means that gamir vesavir, as we said, someone is someone who has higher level of knowledge, and he will not only be able, as the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, the last chapter, speak about gradations, all these gradations for someone to reach the understanding of Torah. So he'll be able not only to comprehend and to remember, but also to add his own understanding. Unkita reshuta. But with all said and done, he still need to get a special exterior permission before he goes and rules. As we said, in those days it wasn't a Shulchan Aruch. In those days, they need to learn either from the tradition, from the Kabbalah, or they need to look and understand all the Rishonim. So therefore, maybe not, you don't need the Gamir v'Savir. But obviously nowadays you have the code and everything. It's a famous story about Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan. So they said about him that he gave smicha, he gave a rabbinical ordination to students who are not the most brightest, promising students. And one asked him why. He said, look, when you have an army at peace, then every course for every officer, for every level, needs to take months and years. When you are in an act of war, you do it quickly and you just give people different level of ranking just because you need to handle war. And he said today it's a milchemet hayetzer. Today is the fight against all these evil sources. So as long as he is a God-fearing person, Yireh Shamayim, and he will check before he rules, I'll do it and I'll give him smicha. Anyway. אבל לא נקיט רשות הדיני לא דיני, או דילמה אף על גב לא נקיט רשות הדיני דיני. This is a basic requirement that he gets a permission from the auxiliary before he rules, otherwise we don't take it. That's the, or you said Gamir v'Savir, you have such a level of knowledge that even he is not getting a auxiliary permission, he can rule and it's accepted. Tashma de Marzut Rabbi Rav Nachman Dan Dinei V'Ta'ah. It happens. This great rabbi rules and made a mistake. Atale Kamei Rav Yosef. So you ask, since I rule wrongly, do I need to compensate? It's like liability for wrong ruling. Amar le im kiblu chalayu lo tishalem v'ilo zil shalem. Depends. If they accept your judgment, so you don't need to. If they're not, you have to. Shma mena ki lo nakit reshut adinei dinei. So here you derive from that even the judge did not get a consent from the auxiliary, we accept it's okay, because what is derivative? In those days, if you get a consent from the auxiliary, it's almost like liability insurance. If you rules and it was erroneous rules, since you get a consent from the auxiliary, you are fine. You don't need to pay out of pocket if you made a mistake, which unfortunately can happen in the way that the world runs. אמר רב היימן דבאי למידן דינה והתאה באי למפטרה לשקול רשותה מבארץ שגלותה. So as we said, since he did it with consent, so it's okay. The Kesef Mishnah in Talmud Sanhedrin chapter 6 said that either it's because Hefker Bedin Hefker that he has this permission, but it's a discussion how far you go. The Radvaz said that Parnasei Keilot, the people who are in charge for the community, like people in charge for collecting funds, people in charge for different honors, etc., not necessarily ordained. When they make in those days takanot letzorech hatzibur, they make a special enactment for the good, for the sake of the community, they have the right to להפקיע ממון לטובת הציבור, to impose any type of punishment and fine, monetary fine on individual for the sake of the community, and they have the same authority. וכן אמר שמואל לשקול רשותם בעת ריש גלות, שמואל said the same thing. He needs to get a permission from the auxiliary. So it's important to know that in those days the Resh Galuta have such a level of knowledge sometimes that he was able to rule, but sometimes some of the Resh Galuta were not so erudite, yet the authority gave them such an autonomy that go to tremendous power. The story goes that it was the Rivash that get the permission from the government, in a sense, to even impose capital punishment on individual that didn't follow the Turim ask, because we see that in our Gemara that the auxiliary gave the right to a judge to rule. So it's a big discussion how far you go, the difference between Eretz Israel to Babylon. He tried to prove that, you see, in those days Iraq was under the rulership of Iran. The ancient Israel, Palestine they call it, under the Rome. So he tried to say that the whole idea of melucha you see here the auxiliary have more power, not only of his place, but other places. So he tried to say that it's a two category. One is the auxiliary, according to the tradition, was Ben Achar Ben LeDavid HaMelech, was a direct descendants, but not only direct descendants, but also son after son to King David. There is a from Nasi in Eretz Israel that was a descendants of David HaMelech, but not son after son. It's a side note, and I'm saying just as a friendly side note. As you know, I'm privileged to be son after son to Noam Elimelech, Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, was last name Weisblum. So I remember years back, I'm going back about 25 years ago, I published my first book on Rashi, and I have in my apartment in Yerushalayim in Har Nof several well-prominent rabbis that came to my home. One of them, I have the Dayan Weiss, but one of them was Rab Moshe Halberstam, who's a very close friend to my late father-in-law, Rab Heitner. So anyway, Rab Halberstam came there and he said to me, I'm jealous of you. I said, what do you mean? He says, to have the privilege to befriend and talk and visit someone who's son after son to Noam Elimelech. So I was jokingly said to him, let's do a trade. Give me your Torah, I give you my Yichus. So he said, don't belittle that. He says, son after son carries something very special. He went on and on and on to tell me. The late Rab Moshe Halberstam was for those who are not familiar, was not only one of the luminary rabbi at his generation, but also a judge of the Idah Haredit, of the Supreme Rabbinic Court, one of the well-respected in Yerushalayim. Anyway, so here they said that the auxiliary was not only descendants, but also son after son to David HaMelech. So the Gemara said, Pshita mehacha lehacha umehatam lehatan. So they said that from here to there, from Babylon to Babylon, and from there, from Eretz Israel to Eretz Israel, the consent is okay. Mehacha lehatam mehanei. So the same thing, which is the right to judge from Babylon apply also to Eretz Israel. So even he made a mistake in Eretz Israel, he is covered. It's almost like liability insurance. The hacha shevet vehatam mechokek. It's like srara yoter ktana. It's less recognition. כדתניא לא יעשו שבט מיהודה, אלו ראשי גלויות שבבל שרודין את ישראל בשבט. So there are a few interpretation. What does that mean? Shevet, is that a stick? Is that some say that it's a shilton, it's a control, but anyway, the Persian kingdom gave them this right. ומחוקק מבין רגליו אלו בני בניו של הלל שמלמדים תורה ברבים. That's basically the prognostication, the prophecy of Israel Yaakov in Bereshit Memtet in the Genesis 49, that's applied to a future. But still, mehacha lehacha, mehatam lehacha, mai. So it means the permission from Nasi in Israel, is that apply to Bavel, that exempt him if he made a mistake? Tashma, the Rabbi Bar Chana dan dina v'ta'ah. Great Rabbi again made a mistake in ruling. Ata lekamel Rav Chia amar lei, ikiblu chalayich teshalem v'ila zil shalim. והרבא בר חנא רשות האב ענקית, שמע מינה מהטעם לאכל ומאה נשמע מינה. So basically it's one way, not the other way around. As we said, the problem is that the Reish Galuta not always was Yirei Shamayim, not always a God-fearing people. ולא מחנה והרבא בר חנא כי הרבה מנצה בעדי Reish Galuta. So sometimes the people around the auxiliary who's not always a God-fearing person was also difficult people. So one time they have a fight. Amar lo Rav Minachon akit reshut akit shurota me'Abba Mari, so which is from Rav Huna. Abba Mari me'Rav, Rav me'Rabbi Chia, ve'Rabbi Chia me'Rabbi. So they said bibilta de'alma u'de'au kimlo. It's not minadin. It's just want to tell them something to leave them alone. וכי מאחר לו מעני רבא בר חנא רשות דנקת למה לי? להראות עומדים על הגבולין. He speaks about those villages that on the bridge. So למעשה the truth is, as we said, רשות מנשיא ארץ ישראל, the permission from the president in Israel, it's not sufficient. You have to have the auxiliary in Babylon. It's a famous story about Rabbi Akiva Eiger, one of the מפרשי המשניות, now name, the commentary of Mishnayot, gave a smicha to his son. Rabbi Akiva Eiger fought a tooth to nail. He wrote a lot of letters. He challenged. He said that it's not sufficient the father to give a smicha to his son. And he said that he is doesn't have the knowledge. But the Shvut Yaakov and many others speak about the whole concept of father gives smicha to his son. And here some said that he just went to his father to send him to the proper period in order to get smicha. Or there are others who say that it all depends. If it's a hefker bet in hefker, that's fine. But if it's come to the real smicha, when it's come to a complicated halachic question, that's a different story. It should not be father to son. מהי רשות הקריאה ונחית רבא בר בר חנא לבבל? אמר לרבי חייא לרבי בן אחי יורה לבבל, יורה ידין ידין. יתיר בכורות, יתיר. So again, the way we say that is not yore that we call now in the smicha concept. You see it on the, it's like question and answer. כי אבא נחית רב לבבל, אמר לרבי חייא לרבי בן אחותי יורה לבבל, יורה. So you respond, יורה. ידין, that's a different category, someone who can sit in court. ידין, יתיר בכורות, said אל יתיר. So why? So later we explain, משנה למר דקרא קרי בן אחי, משנה למר דקרא קרי בן אחותי. וכי תמה האחיה ומעשה ואמרמר, אייבו וחנה ושילה ומרתה ורבי חייא כולהו בני אבא בר אחא קרסילה מכפרי הבו. זאת אומרת, רב ברכו עדה וברכתה, רב ברכנה אחו עליו ברכתה. So you see the מפרשים here explain that it was a second marriage, it was a steps, and the child that married the others was not neither stepbrother nor the stepsister. So basically that was legitimate marriage. Rashi in Moed Katan 20 explained it, but the key is, and that's a different story also, there's some say that Rabbi Bar Chana in the Shas was his nephew. But anyway, V'i ba'it eima, it's another interpretation. Daf Hei Amud Bet, page 5b. Al Shem Chochmato Dichtiv Emor LaChochma Achoti At. So basically the way it's written here, you see more in Gemara in Moed Katan 20, it's he want to imply indirectly how wise is he. Anyway, since we talk about permission that he received from Rabbi, Yatir Bechorot, so he said Al Yatir. So it's not the firstborn animal permitted. Rabbi Yehuda Hasid said, may Rav declare the firstborn animal permitted, so he said, he may not declare animal permitted. You mean to say that he's not baki, that he's not familiar? So the Torah Chaim said that obviously he have this wisdom. So what's the idea? We said that he is very wise. You have to have sometimes baki or bekia, special, like in the medicine or other fields, you have a specialties. Which means you understand the general concept, but you need to know specifically which type of mum and what's the blemish. So Aruch LaNer said that it wasn't just, he really was in a way graduate and be part of all his life in a sense that was his specialty, that he really grew up in that way. Ela לחלוק לו כבוד לרבא בר חנא. Give him another option. ויבאי תימה משום הגוף רב בקיע במומת פי ושאר מומת דלא יעידיש, that he's so familiar with those mumim, those blemishes in animals, that he knows what is permanent, what is not. ואמר כי אגב נשר הרב ואדוני שרמו מעובר. So it's a famous story about Reb Chaim Sonnenfeld running out of time, but it just that he never wants to be a Rav. So they push him, the son of the Brisker Rav, push him. Anyway, eventually they give him kind of push in such a level that he have the smicha and he was a Rav of a place. So all his life he used to call himself Purim Rav. So they asked him, why you call yourself a Rabbi of Purim? So he said, when it's a Purim, the real Rav of the community cannot paskin, cannot rules, because it's Purim, he's getting drunk. So they take someone else. So he said, that's what I feel, there's no one else can take it, and you tell me that there's no one else to do the job, so I'm calling myself with his another, with his act of humbleness, Reb Chaim Sonnenfeld called himself Purim Rav, but it is the concept that people have a great trepidation when it's come to Paskin Halachot and the rules. Someone who's really a Resh Hamayim, someone who's really have a fear of God, should be very careful. By any means, we're not comparing to anybody whatsoever, but I remember when I was for about 15 years of my life, rabbi of relatively established or big community in Maryland. It was several times a complicated question. Someone was a breach of death, and it was on a respirator or ventilator, and the family disputed should disconnect or not connect the respirator, and they called me up several times in the middle of the night. So anyway, I went to the Rosh Hashiva of Ner Israel, Rabbi Feldman, and he said, this shelot chamurot, this complicated question, you need to go to Reb David Feinstein. So just go to show you a humbleness. This is a giant Rosh Hashiva. Rabbi Aaron Feldman is giant Rosh Hashiva. He said, this type of shadows you should go to Rabbi Feinstein. So again, you don't paskin this type of things just because you think that's the way. You go to a prominent posting that no... Anyway, Yore, so he said Yore, Igami Rishut Alam Elim Mishkal. So I need to get a special permission to... So the idea is, sometimes it's not enough you know. It's also how to explain the people, especially people who are not so familiar. משום מעשה שהיה לתניא, פעם אחת הלך רבי למקום אחד וראה בני אדם שמגבלים יסודיהם בטומאה. אמר להם, מפני מה אתם מגבלים יסודיכם בטומאה? So why you doing such a thing that you take you kneading dough while they are not in a state of purity? אמרו לו, תלמיד אחד בא לכאן והורה לנו, מי ביצעים? So it was one the Talmud that said that אין מכשירים, והוא מביצים, דרש לו ואינו סבור מביצעים כאמר. ותאו נמי בעם, מקרמיון, מפיגה פסולים, שמביצעים ואינו סבור, ומתגלה בחטאת פסילה, אך שהוא נמי לו מכשירי. ולא יעתה מן חטאת בין המים חיים, אך שור דלו לא מכשיר. תנא מותא שגזרו על תלמיד על יורה, להם כן נותן רשות מרבו. Obviously, it's a lot to talk. How careful. I remember one time they told me about the big Hasidic Rebbe. He was like my son-in-law, a walking computer there. You ask him any source, this is way before the computer era. He gives you the place, Shas, Poskim, Rishonim, Achronim. But then, to Paskin, he doesn't know. He just gives you the sources. There are people like that. So there's two different things between knowing the subject, familiar with the subject, years experience with the subject, and then know how to Paskin. One of the luminaries, Moshe Heinemann, of Agudat Israel in Baltimore. I have the privilege to not only know him, but he really treated me like a friend. And I remember so many times I came to him in a quiet way and I asked him with shaylas, complicated things, and he know right away the source, but also tell me how should I explain to my barabatim the explanation properly, so people take those things in a proper way. So there's the idea of Yore is not just the knowing the halacha, knowing the source of the halacha, but know also how to convey it to people so people can take it in a proper way and learn it nicely and properly. Anyway, so here we talk about reshus, that you need to go to the real Torah scholar to get a special permission for that. It's name of place. דרש לו מותר ללטות חיטים בפסח, אמרו לו, לאו רבי מיני דצור איקרא אחא, תניא תמיד הורה הלכה בפעם רבו. If you have a rabbi, you should not rules. אלא אם כן הרחוק ממנו 3 פרסות כנגד מחי ישראל. אמר לו, לאו דעתי. He didn't pay attention and you right, and I did not enter my mind that Rab Mani was in the vicinity. רבי חייא חזי אלהו גברא דאהבה קאי בבית הקברות. So אמר לי, לה בן איש פלוני כהן אתה? אמר לי, אין, אבו עדהו גברא, גבה עיניים אבא. נתן לה בגרושה וחיללו. פשיטה, לפלגה הכמר דמענה, על תנאי מאי, תשמד, אמר לרבי יוחנן ולרב שמן, הרי אתה ברשותנו על שתבוא אצלנו. So, another time, we'll talk more. The whole idea here that they here have a special permission limited to a specific period of time. But another time we're going to elaborate when exactly you need to get the reshut and how exactly the exempt from compensation when you get these reshuts. One should read more the Meiri, Tosfot Rosh, and more on this sugya.